Just in that 4 weeks alone, that American brigade had 13 killed in action, 26 wounded in action, and 1 missing in action. When I got back from Timor, I actually took a bit of leave, took a couple of months leave, and then got posted to Brisbane onto the Divisional Headquarters, which was a relatively high profile job, but didn't necessarily mean I was going to get deployed or anything like that. Then Iraq kicked off, and Iraq kicked off in 2003, but we weren't heavily involved in it. The Special Forces were involved in the 2003 invasion, but the conventional army wasn't. And it wasn't until 2005 that it was decided that Australia would contribute a battle group to Iraq. And a contingent was put together to take over the Al-Mathana province, which was in southern Iraq, and I was part of that effort. But I was not to go to Al-Mathana, I was to go to Basra and be in a cell called the ANR, Australian National Representative, which was an Australian colonel on the British Divisional Headquarters. So the British ran southern Iraq, and Al-Mathana was in their area, so we formed part of their division. So I was on the cell there. And so there I am, and I've turned up, and it was quite interesting actually. I remember we were all very eyes wide open because Iraq was a very serious conflict at this stage. Lots of roadside bombs, lots of rockets and mortars being fired into the camps, into the FOBs by the enemy. So very real. I remember we landed in Basra. We finally got to Basra, got picked up by the Aussies, and they took us straight to the armoury and said, hand in your weapons. And I was like, what? Hang on. And it was night time as well, and we arrived in the evening, and I was like, what are you talking about? They said, no. The greatest threat inside this base is that you might accidentally shoot someone. So the British had decided to take the weapons off everyone. But the Americans refused. There were a few Americans on the base. They all walked around. But no, you only drew your weapon in Basra. You only drew your weapon if you left the base. And then what happened was in Baghdad, things were getting a bit real. And the job that they'd originally planned for me in Basra was not so important anymore. They'd changed the chain of command and things, and our little cell was effectively redundant. So I then became a bit of a free agent. There was a job in Baghdad, which was a critical job. It was called the BCTLO, which is American Brigade Combat Team, that ran the heart of Baghdad. Inside that area, the Australian SecDet operated, security detachment, and there was a liaison officer on that American brigade. And the guy who'd been doing the job hadn't been doing it particularly well. He'd actually been creating a few problems. And so I was told, right, we're sending this guy on extended rockall, and you're going to take over for 4 weeks. And at the time, there was a guy called Douglas Woods, who was an Australian who'd been captured. He's an Australian civilian who'd married an American woman and was living in America, and had got a job with one of the defence contractors and was driving trucks, resupply trucks up from Kuwait under escort. But one of these convoys had been ambushed, he'd been taken prisoner. Australia was very keen to get him back. So there's a big operation all around that. During that time, just in that 4 weeks alone, that American brigade had 13 killed in action, 26 wounded in action, and 1 missing in action. The missing in action one is quite something. When someone's killed in action or wounded in action, at least you can process that. Like, you've got their body, you evacuate them, you have your ceremony. When they're wounded, you take them to the hospital, you deal with them. When they're missing, there's no closure until you find them. And from what I understand, that American soldier still has never been found to this day. Yeah, the 4th Brigade Combat Team of the 3rd Infantry Division. And I just remember the anxiety that everyone was under, just trying to find him, and just sending patrol back out into Baghdad to try and find this guy. So the American soldier who went missing in action was never found. Woods was found actually, and the way that he was actually found, it's a funny story, but the Iraqi army found him, and the Iraqi army, under the mentorship of the American brigade, were doing a routine clearance, searching house by house, room by room. And this young Iraqi lieutenant went up the stairs and went up into a room that was empty, other than a big, rolled up rug, Middle Eastern rug. It was sort of against the wall, and anyway, he sort of went in, and apparently he went in, and then he left, and then he thought that the rug looked a bit lumpy, And so he went up and he kicked the rug, and the rug went, ugh. And it turned out that it was he'd been hogtied basically and was wrapped up in this rug. That was the way the story was relayed to me, and so then that's how they found him. So then, you know, all the Australian Special Forces and all the other American Special Forces who were all waiting to go and pull this guy out ended up just turning up in a Hummer, I think, and putting him in the back and driving him out. It was just, again, interesting to be part of that. A couple of near-death experiences while I was in Iraq, flying in a helicopter across Baghdad, and the helicopter started, you know, jarring left and right quite violently. I just didn't really know what was going on. And then when we landed, these guys were from Nevada National Guard or something, and the guy, the loadmaster's looking over the helicopter. I said, "What are you doing?" He goes, "I'm just looking for holes." And he goes, "We were getting shot at before." And I had no idea because I was just a passenger in the background. But yeah, we were getting shot at from ground fire. From, you know, as you fly over the city, people get on their rooftop and just shoot at you. I didn't, you know, it wasn't so traumatic because I didn't even realise what it was until it was over. Also had some airburst rockets blast above me. I was actually shopping at the American PX in the car park, and some rockets blew up above our heads, and I didn't really they'd already blasted and finished before I realised what they were. And I thought, geez, this is great. They're gonna write to my family and say, "Dear sir, ma'am, your son was killed while shopping in Baghdad." The next day I was in a meeting, and the Force Protection Officer said to me, he said, "Oh, Paddo, were you at the PX yesterday when those rockets went off?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Mate, you're very lucky." I said, "Why is that?" And he showed me a photo. The rocket had banana peeled. So instead of, when a rocket blows up, it's supposed to fragment perfectly into shrapnel, and that shrapnel's supposed to spread everywhere. But instead of fragmenting, just the front blew up and the rest of it peeled back like a banana peel. And this thing just thudded into the ground. And so they were able to pick it up, and they took it to the thing. And it made me wonder if it had functioned correctly in the shrapnel, because it was so close, but it didn't get hit by anything. And I thought, geez, that's odd. As an artillery officer as well, I thought it's not supposed to work that way, you know. So again, I don't know, like, that's just lucky, I guess, that the Iraqi insurgents don't take very good care of their ammunition, you know, and so it doesn't function properly. So yeah, Iraq for me, I was really what you call a FOBIT, you know, forward operating base person. My job was to stay within the barracks. I wasn't a door kicker, I wasn't, but even inside the FOB, and when you're moving between FOBs, a certain degree of danger, but certainly nothing like the guys who are actually out there doing the job every day.